influence of perceptions of applicants' self-esteem on hiring decisions. A dataset analyses presentation by Madison, Aitken, Daniella, Biondic, and Tajinder, Uppal. Previous data suggests that people believe those with low self-esteem are less likely than those with high self-esteem to possess positive qualities. For example, participants tended to rate low self-esteem as less intelligent, conscientious, agreeable, and attractive than high self-esteem, though the literature suggests such beliefs are unfounded. Therefore, it seems likely that people with low self-esteem can be considered a marginalized group and that they may experience both subtle and overt types of discrimination. This study examines a hiring situation in which low self-esteem may be discriminated against.
When participants came in for the study, they were told that the purpose of the study was to learn about factors that may influence how people make hiring decisions. They were initially divided into two conditions, where they viewed a job advertisement for a data analysis position in a lab. In the first condition, the job ad emphasized the need for social skills, whereas in the second condition, there was no mention of social skills being required. Participants then viewed a reference letter written by a professor who previously employed the applicant in a similar position. The professor either mentioned that a weakness of the applicant was their low self-esteem, or they did not mention the applicant's self-esteem at all. The participants also viewed the applicant's resume, which was the same in all conditions, and then filled out a questionnaire rating the applicant on various items. 75 participants completed the study. All participants were first-year undergraduate students taking introductory psychology who volunteered for the study to fulfill a course requirement. An equal number of males and females completed the study. However, when volunteering for the study, participants selected the study based on an advertised description of the study. Therefore, some self-selection bias was possible. Participants were evenly divided into the social skills requirement conditions. However, descriptive statistics using cross-tabulations showed that within each of these conditions, participants were not equally distributed to the self-esteem conditions. For instance, within the participants who viewed the job ad that required social skills, 22 participants read the reference letter with no information about the applicant's self-esteem, whereas 16 participants read the reference letter that described the applicant as having low self-esteem.
The questionnaire completed by participants was separated into two sections. On each item, they rated applicants on a 7-point Likert scale. Item analyses were conducted to measure the internal consistency of the questionnaire for both sections. Section 1 produced a Cronbach alpha of 0.83, and Section 2 produced a Cronbach's alpha of 0.82. Therefore, items for both sections showed high internal consistency. A correlation matrix of items for both sections did not produce correlations that were greater than 0.6. Thus, none of the items warranted removal.
Our first research question was, are applicants that are portrayed as having low self-esteem less likely to be hired, and does this change if social skills are required for the job position?
The following items made up the first section of the questionnaire. To examine the interrelationships among the variables on the first section of the questionnaire, we ran a bivariate correlation. The highlighted cells represent correlations that are significant with p-values of less than 0.05. This table shows that in general, the items were highly intercorrelated. The item that was least frequently correlated with other items was the rating of the applicant's trustworthiness with company property. Because participants were evaluating the applicant on a number of different items, we conducted a principal components analysis to determine whether ratings on certain criteria clustered together. This is important because we cannot base judgments of applicant hireability on a single item. To increase the reliability of our decisions, we use these principal components as dependent variables. We requested a principal components analysis with Fermat rotation and extraction based on eigenvalues greater than 1. 3 components were extracted. Overall, the 3 components accounted for 67.76% of the variance. The first component accounted for 28.79% of the variance. We looked at the items that loaded above 0.4 on component 1, based on Stevens' 2002 book titled Applied Multivariate Statistics for the Social Sciences, which recommends interpreting factor loadings with an absolute value of greater than 0.4. Based on the items that loaded highly on component 1, we called component 1 applicant suitability, as these items all seem to relate to how well matched or how well suited the applicant was to the job description. The second component accounted for 23.91% of the variance. Based on the items that loaded highly on component 2, we called Component 2 Likelihood of Success, as all of the items seem to relate to how successful the applicant would be in the position described in the job advertisement. The third component accounted for 15.06% of the variance. Based on the items that loaded highly on Component 3, we called it trustworthiness, as both items seem to relate to trust in the applicant.
For each extracted component, we carried out a two-way analysis of variance. This design allowed us to examine the main effect of applicant self-esteem on the dependent variable, independent of whether the job requires social skills, and the main effect of whether the job requires social skills on the dependent variable, independent of applicant self-esteem. We also examined the interaction between applicant self-esteem and whether the job position requires social skills.
Before carrying out each ANOVA, we checked that the necessary assumptions were met. We generated separate histograms for each of the 4 conditions. Some of the distributions were skewed, but we proceeded with the analyses because ANOVA is robust to the violation of the assumption of normality. As previously mentioned, the sample consisted of first-year undergraduate students with an equal number of males and females. The data collected represented a random sample of the population. Because we did not collect the data, we cannot be sure that the scores are independent. However, our working assumption is that the scores on the test variables are independent of one another. Levine's test of homogeneity of variances was non-significant for all analyses. Therefore, the homogeneity of variance assumption was met.
Two-way ANOVAs were conducted on the 3 components extracted. There was a significant main effect found for applicant self-esteem on likelihood of success. The results of the ANOVA with likelihood of success as the dependent variable suggests that when applicants are described as having low self-esteem, they are rated lower, on average, on likelihood of success than when no information about their self-esteem is provided. This shows that having information about an applicant's low self-esteem leads to negative perceptions of the applicant on the following: chances of being hired, likelihood of salaried position, competence at the job, confidence in person as employee, and trust to do the job properly. The results of the ANOVA with applicant suitability as a dependent variable were not significant. Similarly, the results of the ANOVA with trustworthiness as a dependent variable were not significant. This suggests that applicants with low self-esteem are not perceived as less qualified for a position or less trustworthy than applicants for whom self-esteem is not mentioned. There was no significant main effect of the social skills requirement variable in any of the 3 analyses. Therefore, the requirement of social skills as part of the job advertisement had no effect on participants' judgment of the applicant's suitability, their likelihood of success, or their trustworthiness.